All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Tailored by Ambition, Money Matters. Today we got one of my boys, Matt. Matt, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so me and Danny been friends for a long time. We actually met on a cruise back in what must have been like 2015,
Yep.
all through the Mediterranean. So I'm a big cruise fanatic. I do a lot of cruise content, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. You can find me at Cruise with Matt. I host an online cruising platform called Cruisin with Matt. Episode 1 is out now. If you're interested, it is an episode on board the Norwegian Escape, going to Bermuda for 5 days, playing a lot of golf and enjoying that. So if you are a cruiser, if you're interested in learning more about what cruising has to offer, please check it out. And I'm very excited to be joining my man Danny for another great episode.
Yeah, man, it's been a crazy time we're living in right now.
You're not kidding, bro.
I know, dude. But I mean, I think we're still living in the best time in human history. I think we have so much opportunity everywhere. There's so much resources available to do anything you want, even in a lockdown, you have access to so much information.
Absolutely. There's more at our disposal now than there ever has been before. So, I mean, it's all about taking advantage of the tools that are offered to you and making the most of it. And yeah, that's what your channel is all about, bro. Making sure that people are taking advantage of the opportunities that they have.
Right, dude. Yeah, something I notice is, I mean, a lot of the youth doesn't understand finances as much or taxes, and they don't teach that in school. So, I was just so shocked to see so many people just not understand credit or taxes. And that's something that I think everybody should know, and it should be taught in school, and there's a reason for that, but we're not going to get into that in this podcast. But yeah, man, cruising is a very, somebody like, oh, why cruising on a finance channel? I think cruising is one of the best ways to travel for the budget.
I agree.
So, for example, somebody going into the Caribbean has never gone to the Caribbean before. A cruise is the best because you get to sample a bunch of islands in one shot. And then if you like a particular island, you can go visit back, spend more time there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on the money there. There's a lot of things to love about cruising. You mentioned the first one, which is, I often refer to it as a kind of a sampler platter of travel. You get a little sample of each place and the places that really stick out in your mind, or you find activities or culture that really speaks to you. It's an opportunity to get a little taste of it and see places that you may want to return for a 3-day or 5-day vacation. Another thing to keep in mind about cruising is that the value is really there. Speaking of a financial channel like yours, when you start talking about the amount of money that it costs you to go on vacation, let's take the Caribbean, for example, right? So for us, we're both here in Florida. So cruising is very accessible. It's a quick drive to the port. It might be 2-3 hours to get to the port. And so you don't have to worry about a flight. Let's say you want to go to St. Lucia for a week. You're talking about a flight to St. Lucia, whether it's from Miami, from Tampa, wherever you're going. You're talking about transportation around the island to get to any activities that you want to do, whether it's renting a car, whether it's paying for taxis, whatever it may be. You're talking about hotel costs and expenses. You're talking about food, talking about the money that it costs you to do any of the entertainment or activities that you're interested in. So when you talk about a cruise, people get a little scared away by the original price tag, right? They see, $1,200 for a week. Well, that $1,200 includes your food. It includes your transportation, your entertainment, in many cases, your drinks, depending on which package you select. So for me, I think, if you do the calculations of what it would actually cost you to spend a week somewhere versus what it costs you to get on a cruise, I think it's the best value in travel. And then the other thing that I like to mention is that on a cruise, everybody's on vacation, right? So let's say you go to Miami for a weekend. A lot of the people that you run into, whether it's at the restaurants, at the clubs or bars that you choose to go out to, they live in Miami. They're living their everyday life. They have emails and work and all of the regular stresses of life that they have to deal with. When you're on a cruise, every single person that you run into is going to be on vacation. They're all in a great frame of mind. They're all relaxed. They're looking to have a good time, looking to be social. It's easy to meet friends. I mean, that's part of the reason you and I have become as close as we are. It's a cruise experience where we really just enjoyed each other's company. You had almost your entire family there, and I know we spent almost every night together going up to the club. So it's really a great social experience as well for people who are looking to meet new people around their age and really get people from different cultures all over the country, sometimes all over the world.
Awesome. Well said, dude. Yeah, I completely agree with all that. When do you think, or what changes have you seen the cruise lines implement due to COVID and all this stuff?
So it's interesting because each cruise line is approaching it a little bit differently. the CDC has laid out guidelines for what they expect as kind of a bottom level in order for cruise lines to resume sailing from the United States. And one of those thresholds is a 90% vaccination rate amongst travelers or amongst guests. And so what you're seeing is a lot of cruise lines mandating vaccines. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out without getting too political. Unfortunately, our governor here has made it really difficult to require vaccination in order to do anything, any sort of business. Anybody who wants to protect their employees or their fellow guests is not allowed to ask for proof of vaccination here in Florida. So the cruise lines are kind of going back and forth with the state of Florida because you've got the CDC on one side saying you have to have 90% of your people vaccinated. And you've got the state of Florida on the other side saying you're not allowed to ask if people are vaccinated. So it's kind of this balancing act. And I think they're still trying to figure out what's going to work in terms of how they figure out whether people are vaccinated or not. So the vaccination threshold is very important. Another thing is modifications to the actual shipboard experience. So the first one is capacity limits. And certainly for the first several months of cruising, you'll see much lower capacity on board these ships. Some of them, I believe, are starting at 50 to 60%. So there's going to be quite a few rooms that are unsold, and certain activities will be capacity controlled as well. Theater shows, dinners, things of that nature. They'll be controlling the flow of people to make sure that social distancing is still observed. An interesting thing is in Europe, MSC has been sailing for several months now, and they do not require vaccination. So MSC is going under the social distancing, mask wearing policy, kind of the standard that we've been abiding by throughout most of the pandemic. And they've seen great success. I think they've serviced over 300,000 cruisers, and they've only seen somewhere between 50 and 70 cases on board. So it's a very high success rate. It'll be interesting to see how things play out here in the U.S. I'm hoping that it's coming soon. We're getting more and more good news as more time passes by, more people get vaccinated. I know that several cruise lines, Disney, Royal Caribbean, and I believe one more that I can't figure out the name of, has just received the approval to start doing test sailings, which will allow them to kind of send a couple of ships out with volunteer travelers and do some drills in terms of safety and making sure that everything goes off without a hitch and that the protocols that they have in place will work. So it's coming soon. How soon, I don't know. Hopefully, by August or September, we should be looking at resuming cruising from the U.S.
How do you think that's going to affect pricing?
So the one thing that I can say is that the demand is certainly there. People are wanting to cruise. There was a lot of questions about, especially given how things played out early in the pandemic, whether people would want to get back on a cruise ship. That question seems to have been answered. Most people, especially loyal cruisers, are very anxious to get back on board a cruise ship. Pricing wise, I think it's going to vary depending on sailing and destination, right? I mean, just as it does in the typical market, it's all about supply and demand. So I can tell you that I booked a cruise for December of this year for my birthday. And my price was very reasonable. For an 8-day cruise to the Eastern Caribbean, I think we paid about $1,000 a person, which is pretty standard in terms of what you would look at under quote unquote normal times.
Right.
Certainly there will be itineraries and ships that are under high demand and may seem a bit more expensive. And I would expect that there's also, some cruises that probably won't sell as well, where you'll be able to steal a deal, especially if you can wait until a month or two before the cruise is ready to sail. I don't think you'll see a drastic price hike as you have in some other industries as a result of, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, supply and demand. The supply is not there in a lot of cases. And as soon as the cruise line is able to resume and feels that they have the crew necessary to keep people safe, I think the supply will be there to meet the demand. So I'm not expecting the prices to change drastically. They will probably fluctuate a little bit, but I would expect it to be pretty similar to the normal cruise market.
Okay. All right. So let's go a little bit into investments here. So if you had to pick one of the cruise lines to invest in, which one would it be?
So I am heavily invested in Norwegian right now. And I sank a decent amount of money into Norwegian when they were at around $20 a share.
Okay.
Just because, before the pandemic hit, they were trading around somewhere between $55 and $60 a share. Seemed to me like a pretty easy decision.
Right.
It ended up dragging out a lot longer than I expected. I certainly thought that things would start to normalize before they did. So it's been more of a long play than I was anticipating it having to be.
Okay.
But to me, I did that because I know that Norwegian has a new line of ships coming in 2022. That's exciting for me. I also know that in terms of dead money that they're carrying around, it's not quite as massive as Carnival and Royal Caribbean because their fleet's not quite as big. So the amount of money that they have to spend in this down period to maintain their fleet is significantly less. And furthermore, at least compared to Royal Caribbean, the trading price is much lower. Royal Caribbean is going for somewhere around $80 to $90 a share. And I wanted to get in and buy not a super significant, but a decent chunk of shares early in the pandemic. And so, at $90 a share, that was a little rich for my price point.
Gotcha.
I think that they kind of hit both of those marks in terms of, minimizing the amount of dead money that they need to spend during this time, but also having the opportunity to grow back and be successful in a relatively quick time period after the pandemic's over. So I have invested in Norwegian. I would like to preface that by saying I'm in no way qualified to give financial advice.
Right.
But yeah, Norwegian is the one that I chose to invest in, and it again, it's a combination of personal things as well as business principles. But to me, they made the most sense for a couple of those reasons, and so far, it's been a good investment for me, and not like a crazy return at this point, but certainly given the trajectory of things, I'm expecting that in the coming weeks and months, it'll start to look like a better and better investment.
Nice. Yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna turn around. Yeah, it definitely took longer than it was supposed to, but that's fine. Investments are long term. That's something that I always point out to the guys is always, focus on long term plays. This is not about get rich tomorrow. This is play the long run, play the long run, play the long game, and you're gonna get tax savings on that because after years capital gains.
Absolutely.
So there's a lot of benefit to it. So that's good. Stick with it.
And another thing to keep in mind, like as you're saying, talking about the long term play, the market has been disrupted in such a drastic way by the cryptocurrency market just because there is opportunity now to make ridiculous gains in an incredibly short period of time. And so I think, especially for a younger generation that's not well versed in the ins and outs of investments and Wall Street and all sorts of things, cryptocurrency may seem like a more attractive alternative because you can dump $100 into cryptocurrency and turn it into 10 grand in a month and a half. That just I don't care what stock you buy into.
Right.
That you could have bought Amazon as an IPO, and that you wouldn't see that in that short period of time. So it's interesting to see kind of how that's disrupting the stock market, because now you see the regular brokers trying to break into the cryptocurrency market, and they don't know what they're doing. They have no idea how to keep up with the crypto and how quickly it changes, how volatile it is.
Right.
So it's interesting to see. I mean, for me, I've always been more of a traditional. I have more faith in the ability to make money long term off of the stock market. But it is interesting to see. Like, so I tried to buy like 15,000 Dogecoin when it was at 1 cent, and I ended up getting blocked on my limit buy because the price was hiking too quickly. So I didn't end up getting it. But like, let's say I would have done that. I basically put in $200. As of like yesterday, that $200 would have been 10 grand, 12 grand, something like
Right.
that. So it's it's an interesting, pros and cons. I would always advise someone, don't put significant money into crypto because it is so volatile and there's a chance that it'll be gone like that.
Yep.
But also, if you're willing to, the way that I look at crypto is like, I'm going to the casino. I got $200 in my pocket. I'm ready to lose all of it if I have to, and maybe I'll win big. And that's kind of the way that I refer to crypto. But when you look at stocks and things like that, as you mentioned, it's much more of a steady, long term, kind of have a vision in mind sort of play.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about like having diversification, like especially for us. I think a lot of index funds, because they're low fee, and they have, the market average on that's 8%. So if you look at a compound graph, it's ridiculous if you just consistently put money in, and don't freak out when markets go down, because that's a big reason. Because I had one of the guys asked me the other day. It's like, oh, if the compounding is so powerful, how come so many people end up in retirement without anything? And I'm like, they make a few mistakes. They sell on a downturn because they panic, and right there you lose all that gain. because you're realizing those losses. Whereas, if you have it invested, it's not really a loss until you act upon it.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of reasons why people don't end up there. You just gotta be diligent and focused and have a game plan. So yeah, you should have a basket for.
And stick to the game plan. Like, it's
Yep.
one thing to have a game plan, but like you said, people panic, or life circumstances come along. If you have a good plan, stick to your plan.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, understand your financial products. Have an emergency fund. Know how to use credit cards wisely, loans wisely. Like, understand how they work. If you understand how they work, then you will understand what you can gain from them. They can become a tool, because you have different train of thoughts, right? So you have people like Dave Ramsey, and you have people like Robert Kiyosaki. Dave Ramsey does not like debt in any way, and Robert Kiyosaki uses debt to get rich. So that you can, depending on your attitude towards money, you can go either way. So are you more risk adverse? If you know how to handle debt, you can buy properties and rent them out, make them cash flow positive, and that becomes an asset. Because that's something Robert says all the time. Is like, people don't understand even the general concept of asset and liability. They think a mortgage or your house is an asset. It's like, well, that depends, because if you're not making money off of it, it's a liability. Yeah, it could be an asset the day you sell it, but in the meantime, from now to 30 years from now, you're going to pay twice as much for that mortgage.
Right.
So there's different ways to think about it. And that's something that I'll try to make a video in the future explaining a little bit of that, because I think it's something that everybody should know, right? In school, that's not how they teach asset and liabilities. In
Right.
accounting, it's different.
Yeah,
Um,
I think you bring up a good point, which basically, it doesn't even need to necessarily just be applicable to investments, but there's not just one way to get to the end goal. I think we tend to, and maybe it's just human nature. We tend to think of things in a binary way, like, okay, well, there's a right way and there's a wrong way. It's not necessarily always that black and white.
right. And we're taught to be afraid to fail, because you get a bad, you answer the question wrong, instead of learning from it. It's, oh no, you got a bad grade, so here's your penalty or whatever. So it scares people. They're like,
Yeah.
oh, even in investments. I mean, as far as crypto goes, right? Like, I think the space is hot, so put some money in it, but not the majority of your money, and definitely not rent money or bill money. It's just, if
How
you
money
have.
you need.
Right. So first step is to get yourself a budget and understand how much free money you have, after you pay your bills, pay anything else that you have to take care of. Then understand, okay, out of this, how much percentage am I going to risk into something like crypto?
Yeah. And be okay with losing it. I mean,
Yep.
your plan is obviously to multiply it, but don't put in any amount of money that you're not okay with losing. Bottom line.
And also due diligence, right? Like, don't just, because everybody's talking about one of these bad coins, and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna throw it in there. No, it's, there's information available to you.
Right.
Look for it, read,
Absolutely.
understand what it does, and then invest in it. Because if not, you're speculating, and that's, yeah, like gambling.
Yeah. And I mean, unless you're gonna pump and dump something, you should really understand the functionality of the coin.
Right,
Right. I
right.
mean, there are coins out there that are smart long-term plays, and in the interim they could still be volatile, right? I mean, prices can change several cents in a day.
Right.
But reality is, the functionality of the coin offers something that makes it a smart long-term play. Whereas you talk about Dogecoin, like, it's a joke,
Right.
like, and yeah, like I said, if I would have got it at 1 cent and sold at 35, 40 cents,
You can
yeah, I would
curse.
have made a bunch of money. But I also knew that I was going to pump and dump it. Like, I didn't go into Dogecoin like hoping, oh yeah, Dogecoin's the next Bitcoin. Like, no, it's not. There's no chance. There's no
Right.
functionality.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I think on that space, I think Ethereum is the next big thing because of smart contracts.
Yeah, yeah, and man, it's so easy to kick yourself for what you didn't do when the time was right. I mean,
Right.
years ago, probably back in 2017, 2018, when I bought a bunch of XRP, I had to convert my Ethereum into XRP. And if I would have just stuck with it, not that XRP is a bad investment, I still think XRP. I mean, their issue with the SEC seemed to be settled pretty favorably. So we'll see what happens in that regard. But if I would have just put some money into Ethereum, I would have been in much better shape.
Yeah.
So it's It's always woulda, shoulda, coulda, you know?
Right. Yeah. Hindsight's always 2020.
Of course.
So, but yeah, man, I mean, just like focus on what you did. Why? I mean, what I tell people is like never be afraid of or disappointed in your decisions because at that moment in time, with the knowledge you had, you made the decision. So it's not like, oh, I'm such an idiot. No, at that moment, back in 2017, you saw what was in front of you, and you're like, yeah, this makes more sense,
Yeah.
and then play out. That's fine. Learn from it. So whatever, I'm sure you can learn something from that. Like, oh, we know why did I choose XRP? Because of this, X and Y. So
Yeah.
now if you see it happen again, you're like, okay, well, I already chose this route. Maybe this route is better.
Yeah.
And that's when you actually learn and not lose.
Yeah, you can't necessarily look at it as a loss. And again, like you said, I didn't lose money. It's not, XRP is still significantly up from where I bought in.
Right.
I bought in at 19 cents, and it's almost getting close to a dollar, fluctuating up above a dollar and below a dollar. But so I'm still in the green. But reality is, yeah, Ethereum is really, it's blown up in a way that I was not expecting. You know.
Right. So let's go a little bit into, let's see. Tell me about a person or a book that has changed your life or had the biggest impact on your life.
So I think you know this, but the viewers probably have no idea. Logic is someone who really changed my
Yeah.
life in a pretty significant way. And he has always kind of stood out to me as someone who is extremely positive, given all the challenges that he faced throughout his childhood and kind of ascending through his career. But I had an opportunity to meet him several years ago, probably in 2012. I had gone to a concert way early. The concert was like 8 o'clock, and I went at like noon and just parked out back and pre-gamed and tried to meet all the guys outside the bus. And so he came out and he's like, "Hey man, I got to go and do sound check, but I'll catch up with you after." And I was like, "Okay, sweet. Really really cool opportunity to spend a little time with them." So he came back out from sound check and he's like, "Hey man, you want to come on the bus and listen to my album?" And this was probably like 6 to 8 months before his first album was set to be released. So everyone's super hype about it. First studio album. And he's like, "You want to come here before it's released?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely. Of course I do. I'm a huge fan of his at this point." So he brings me on the bus, me and my girlfriend at the time. And we end up spending a solid 2 3 hours just talking about music and life and his story and how he's been able to maintain such a positive mindset through all the bullshit that life has thrown his way. And um, it was really kind of a wake up call for me that your mindset really influences the way that things go in your life and the outcome of some of the things that you try to pursue.
For sure.
And so I really started from that day forward to embody peace, love, and positivity in my life and make that my motto. So much so that I have it tattooed on my arm now.
Right.
But it really put me in a mindset of, hey, the way that I think of things affects the way that things go. And that was a big revelation for me because I had always, not that I was a negative person, I've always naturally been pretty positive, but I doubted myself. I doubted my ability to make the things that I wanted to happen happen. And he gave me that belief in myself that, hey man, you control what your mindset is. If you think you can do it, it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. There'll be 1,000 people who tell you can't. But if you believe that you can and you continue to work towards your goals, you'll find success. And even if it's not exactly what you envision, you'll find the success that you need in your life. And that was a big thing for me. As a 18, 19-year-old kid, I was still in college. I was still kind of figuring out what my path was going to be. But it was really important for me to hear that I could do what I wanted to do if I put my mind to it.
That's what's
And I
up.
was diligent about my path. And we've spent time together several times in the years since. And he's just retired from music, and he's living happily out in Wyoming with his wife and his baby boy. And he created the life that he always dreamed about for himself. He always wanted a family. His family life was really rough growing up. He always wanted to have a son and a wife and a family and enjoy that. And I thought him being willing to step away from music and do what was most important to him a lot of people were upset. Oh man, you're in your prime. You're doing this, and he's like, this is what I want. This is what makes me happy. This is what I've
Yeah,
always wanted for my life. And music
exactly.
got me here. Music gave me the opportunity to live a life that I never could have imagined growing up. On food stamps and living in Section 8 housing and all those sorts of things. And so I'm really super happy for him that he's realized everything that he wanted to get out of his life, and he's enjoying time with his wife and his kid. And again, it's just inspiring to see, like, hey man, this is what I wanted and this is what I achieved. And not because he got a handout, not because someone was willing to stick their neck out for him. No man, he did it on his own. He built his own team. He did it his own way. Was releasing music for free at a time when everyone was telling him he was crazy. Why would you release music for free?
Right.
And his approach was, I'm going to build a fan base and my fan base will follow me. When I start putting out music that costs money, my fan base will buy it. When I start doing shows, my fan base will come because they like the music and they respect the product. And it worked, and it was a model that most people in the music industry were telling him was stupid. You don't know what you're doing. That's not the way to do it. And he built such an organic following of people who really would ride or die for him because they really respected what his message was, what his music represented. Um, and again, it just goes back to that belief in yourself, man. Being willing to risk it for yourself and believe in what you can accomplish if you work hard enough.
Right.
And that was a thing that really kind of put me in the frame of mind that I can do what my dreams are. You can't be lazy about it. You can't expect someone else to come through and make it happen for you. But if you want something bad enough, and you surround yourself with the right people, you will achieve the things that are important to you. So yeah, man, I gotta say Logic is the person that
That's
impacted
great.
me in that way.
I mean, you nailed a lot of important points, right? So one thing was he delayed that gratification, that money, right? Which is something, especially in today, everybody wants Amazon now, like get it now. And like people don't understand. Same thing happens in investing. Like if you just step back and understand, like, okay, this is gonna be a long-term thing. Like he delayed that. He's like, I'm gonna do the work now, not get that dopamine hit or whatever it is. Now I'm gonna build that up and then it explodes because that's how it is. If you do something differently than everybody else and you do it good, it's gonna catch on. But how long did you do that stuff for? Like probably a decade or something, like around a decade, right? Before.
He was putting out free music for a solid 4 or 5 years, man, before
Mhm.
he made any money off of his actual music. And I think that he may have been selling merch in small numbers and doing things like that, small shows in his area. But I mean, his goal was to really build a following that would support him monetarily when the time came.
Right.
And even when he became as big as he was at the peak of his popularity, he always kept his music, his merchandise, his concert tickets affordable because he knew that the people who were following him, they weren't ready to spend $150 on a concert ticket. That wasn't how they got into him. They got into him because they believe in his message and they love what he represents. And I think he always tried to do right by his fans. He's always, certainly in a personal aspect to me, been a fantastic person, and gone out of his way and extended himself in ways that he didn't have to, giving passes and free tickets and backstage passes for me and my family to come see him, and just a genuinely good person. And I think it's easy to really like somebody's music or like somebody's acting or respect their product or their talent. But I think it rises to a new level when you know that the person you're supporting is a great person and stands for the right things. And that's how it was for me with Logic. I knew that the guy that I was giving my money to, the guy that I was riding hard for and supporting, is the kind of person that I wanted to put my name beside and say, yeah, I support that. You
Right.
know, and he's always represented the right things, hard work and positivity and encouraging. I mean, I remember for the longest time he used to stop every concert and make everybody in the crowd like say, I believe in myself, I'm awesome. And really kind of foster that self-improvement, that belief in yourself, because I know a lot of the people who are listening to his music were struggling with depression or weren't believing in themselves or in a similar situation to he was when he was younger, which is in an abusive situation at home, or families struggling with poverty. he's always wanted to help people succeed. And to me, that's as cool as it gets, man.
Right. Agree 100%, man. That's great. Yeah, Logic's a great guy. All right. So let's talk about. Tell me one thing that you're doing today that your future self will thank you for.
Saving money. I mean, I I I I like nice things, but I live a pretty frugal lifestyle, and
Okay.
I don't I don't tend to spend money on things that I don't necessarily need. Um, like when I bought my most recent car, which was probably about a year and a half ago, I had enough money to buy a Mercedes or BMW or something that might get accolades from other people. Oh, that's a nice whip, whatever. I don't care about that. I just never really have. And so I bought a nice car. I mean, I got a Hyundai Sonata, a limited with leather seats and sunroof, things that I know I like and enjoy that feel nice to me. But I didn't spend on something that isn't important to me. And I think that's one of the things that's important to ask yourself, as you start to get older, is am I doing these things for myself or am I doing it to impress other people? Because reality is they don't care.
Okay.
they don't care.
Right.
No matter what you do, they
Yeah.
don't
Stop.
care. I
Stop
promise.
trying to keep up with the Jonases.
Correct.
Yeah.
So I just try to be responsible and make sure that I'm saving enough money. Especially with my medical situation, I've always got to make sure that I have money if something is to go wrong. I never know what my medical future looks like, or if I'm going to be sick, or I had a kidney transplant in August. If anything were to go wrong with that, knock on wood, I pray that it doesn't. But if anything were to go wrong with that, I need to be prepared financially to take on a pretty significant medical bills.
Right.
So just preparing myself, making sure that I have a nest egg that allows me to feel safe and comfortable doing the things that I really do want to do, but being ready for the possibility that things don't go as planned. And I think that goes back to understanding your situation and your circumstance, right? Everyone's different, and if you're a perfectly healthy person who's never had any health issues, maybe you think about those things differently, and your insurance choices may be different than the ones that I have to make.
Right.
But I think that the thing that I will be thankful for down the road is that I have been smart with my money. I built myself enough of a nest egg that if anything is to happen, I'll be prepared financially to take on some of that responsibility. And certainly, going back to our conversation before, I am more risk averse. I am, just because of my situation and the things that I've been through. Having a large sum of money tied up in the markets is not a thing that I can really afford to do, which is unfortunate because certainly I could start to grow wealth in a way that I'm not currently. But having the safety net to me in my situation is a little more important. So I think that's something that I'll definitely be thankful for, whether something goes wrong or not, because I know I have that peace of mind of if something were to happen, I'm in a situation where I can afford to handle some of those things.
I think you're playing it absolutely right, bro.
Well, I appreciate.
I think you're checking all the boxes. I think you're doing good.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. It
Yeah,
sounds
man.
good coming from you because I don't know much. I don't know much like you do, but I definitely feel like given my situation, I'm trying to play my cards the right way.
So, do you have any questions for me? Is there anything you want to find out more about, or something that's piqued your interest lately?
Yeah. So I mean, kind of going back to the conversation that we were having at the beginning. When you start talking about what a smart investment is right now, you have mentioned different funds. I think you said index funds. We talked about the stock market. We talked about cryptocurrency. At this time, we talked about being alive at one of the best times in terms of the opportunity and availability of resources. At this time in history, what do you think the best play is for someone around our age, somewhere between 25 and 35, to set themselves up for the future? What would you be looking at investment wise as considering it a smart play?
Okay, so yeah, definitely you have to have your feet in the game when it comes to crypto. That's whatever percentage you're comfortable at, and that could be Ethereum, Cardano, a little bit of Bitcoin, um, and understand what they do and the power of NFTs. NFTs is coming. It's not going anywhere. It's coming. For example, Dallas Mavericks, Mark Cuban. If you listen to some of his interviews, he's speaking very positively about NFTs in specific. Like him and the Dallas Mavericks are now issuing their tickets as NFTs, because here's the beautiful thing about an NFT. It's code in essence. But in the legacy way of selling tickets, the Mavericks would just print X amount of tickets and sell it to whoever bought them in the first round, and that's it. That person can then resell it, but the Mavericks don't get anything, right? So you
Mhm.
have a whole secondary market of people just, scalping tickets. Now with NFTs, that's on the blockchain, so everything is, on the ledger that they can trace, and there's code built into that ticket now, that every time that ticket exchanges hands afterwards, the Mavericks will get a royalty, and you can,
Mhm.
you program that into the ticket. So now if you go in secondary market and they trade 10 times that same ticket, you're going to get a 5 or 10%, whatever it is, coded into that ticket as royalty. Musicians are doing it. So that's a whole space that you got to follow, because it's not going anywhere. So maybe look into companies that are, you know researching and developing NFT stuff, related stuff, or and blockchain in general, because I think blockchain technology is here to stay. Then secondarily, I would look at, if you're younger, look at small cap companies, like upcoming companies that are have room to grow. And that would have been in the 90s, Amazon, a little bit earlier, Microsoft, all these companies that are trading at a smaller market cap now and have room to grow. And that's where all the gains in the market are going to be. So you need to be, you know, in your retirement plan, majority index funds, because out of the options that they give you in a 401k, you're going to have index funds, you're going to have actively managed funds. And that's the difference between there, is that now there's a fund manager actively, exchanging the stocks within that fund, but that comes with a price. And usually an index fund will beat or be equal to an actively managed fund. So there's no point in paying that expense ratio. And then you have like retirement target dates. And then it'll say, whatever the BlackRock 2025 2050 retirement fund. And it's just saying, okay, you plan to retire 2050. Here's what we think is a proper risk um, ratio for you, right? But then they'll start, as you get closer to the retirement date, they'll start incorporating more bonds into that fund. And to me, bonds are dead. I don't see bonds being any sort of good investment, because interest rates are super low and inflation is outpacing it. So you're actually losing money. I would, on this day, I would never own a bond. I don't see myself owning a bond. So even when I get close to retirement, I will transfer most of my retirement money into dividend stocks. The reason being is, you pick good stocks, good companies that pay dividend, and your nest egg will never deteriorate. So if you do have $1 million, for example, you can live off that dividend of what, let's say it's $1,000 a month, or whatever that money amounts to. But you can live, off of that for however long after your retirement, and you're not selling stocks in order to cash out. So those are things to take note of. Real estate's another one, but real estate's really hot in Florida right now.
Yeah,
So
tough time to get into that right now, man.
but I think it could be the next New York. To be honest, like New York's handles stuff so poorly that I think, you know, in the long run, I think even buying today is still a good investment if it's a long term play.
Really, because I see, I don't think, like, I think at some point in the next 2 years something's going to have to normalize. I mean, people
Right.
are people are putting offers on 20 houses before they find one that they get, and they're putting down 15, 20 over ask.
So here, but that's the thing though. That's the catch, because this is different than '08, right? Because in '08 you had people, doing the same thing, but they were refinancing also. Like people who already had homes were refinancing. And then, you know, there's a study, and I have to find it. I'll send it to you. But they did a comparison of the credit scores that were doing refinances and what they were doing back in '07, '08 versus what happened last year and a little bit of this year. And this year, no one's refining to cash out. They're refinancing to get a lower rate. So
Right.
people have learned from that. So I don't see I have my doubts. Obviously, I think we're due for a correction at some point. But the thing with Florida is there's so much people coming here
Yeah, and they'll
that
continue to because there's no
exactly.
state tax.
So even if we do have a correction, I think Florida will still be pretty comparatively to the rest of the nation. I think we'll be good. Us and Texas and Tennessee, places like that where people are going to, we might have like a 5%, 10%, maybe. If the country were to have like a 25% dip, which I don't think is gonna, I don't know. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, right? But
Right.
I see us being more stable than the rest of the country.
I also think another thing to keep in mind is that the the reason that the market was flying the way that it was back then was strictly because they were giving out unsustainable rates. And now I think a lot of it has to do with the pandemic. People realizing they're spending so much time at home. I want a home that I feel comfortable spending time at, right? Like people are putting in pools, people are
Yep.
adding on to their current homes, people are looking for a bigger home because we're used to being gone at least 40 hours a week, right? And then you start working from home and you decide, you know what, I don't really think this is enough home for me, or I don't think this is the place where I want to be spending all my time. So yeah, the rates are good right now, but I think the reason that the market's flying the way that it is because people are reconsidering what's important to them in a home,
Right.
you know and they're looking for more, or they're looking to expand, or maybe their family has grown. But I don't think it's just driven by the fact that the rates are so low and they're giving these rates to people who are never going to be able to pay the loan,
Right.
which
Right.
basically they knew they were doing that back then. I mean, they knew they were giving out loans that were not going to be.
Yeah. But there's new laws that were put in place after that. So I mean, again, so now my biggest concern for the economy, to be honest, is the printing of money.
Yeah.
That's my number one concern. Number two, maybe student loans.
Well, that's another reason why crypto is such an intriguing possibility, right? I mean, a currency that's not based on a federalized system like that, where when they're in debt, they just print more money.
Yeah.
Like, that's not sustainable. That's why our inflation rate is going to continue to rise as much as it is, because there's no way that it's sustainable. We just keep,
Printing money. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's not an answer.
You're devaluing the money. It's all it is. So it's gonna get tricky. Those are my concerns. The real estate, it could be, but I'll put that third on the list in concerns of a recession or something along those lines.
What do you think a timeline looks like in terms of that stuff actually becoming like a legitimate problem?
So here's my 2 cents on the printing of money. The way it works, right? It's the government issues bonds, and that's how they get the money, right? So then they'll sell it out to China, Japan, all these other countries. But then the older bonds get paid by the the newer bonds or the newer money they're printing. So it's just like a big circle of us exporting dollar bills. That's what we export. So the question is, at what point does that stop? So
Well, at
what?
what point do they come to collect?
Well,
Actually collect, not
well,
collect some new
but
bond.
it's a trick. It's a magic trick because it's like they're gonna pay you in dollar bills. Yeah, so it's beautiful. Like what's a good example? Like I don't know. Like every time you come up to me, I'm gonna give you a dollar bill. Like it's just yeah. Let me borrow your money, and then we'll trade it at whatever the exchange rate is. But I'm gonna still pay you back in dollar, and I'm gonna keep giving you more of it, and I'm gonna print it. Like it makes no sense. It's like
It doesn't make any sense.
that's what I'm saying. The point that China stops buying the debt, or a lot of these countries wake up and stop buying, our debt, then that's when the music stops.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting,
That's that's
especially
that's that's the way I
especially
see it. Yeah.
especially if the tensions beyond economic tensions continue to rise the way that they have been.
Right.
Once it becomes about more than just money, which I mean, not that it being about money is a good thing, but when it's just about money, there's I guess a docile way to settle things. Once it becomes about more than just money, we might be in some trouble.
Right. Right. So we'll see. I mean, it's hard to tell, man. At the end of the day, you just gotta stick to your game plan and just whatever waves come, you gotta ride it out like a cruise.
Yeah, got it right. Now let me ask you one other question I do have for you.
What's up?
Obviously, you working at a financial institution the way that you do. Are I don't even just mean your company. I mean, just in general, are financial institutions concerned about the direction that things are heading in terms of alternative currencies?
I think some will adapt. And so the way I see them adapting, and then I don't know how well versed you are in decentralized finance.
Not very.
So not very. So that's where I think we're going. Um, and that's a longer explanation, but it's basically giving the power to the people to become, in essence, their own bank, right? And actually, I would love to have this conversation, so we can have a second interview, and I'll walk you through the whole process. But if in the future, I don't see banking the same way that it is now, right? So there's retail banking every day, more branches close. Because when was the last time you went into a bank branch physically?
I can't even tell you. I don't know.
Exactly. So it's just sitting there, and they're paying either a lease or a mortgage on it. They're slowly stepping out of that space. I see it already. The next thing is loans. Um, with decentralized finance, you don't need credit because you're putting up collateral. So if you don't make your payments, the person lending you the money will keep your collateral. And then the collateral in this case is crypto. So, and we'll get more into that. But that's going to do away with a lot of lending because now if I'm sitting on my crypto portfolio or my money portfolio, whatever, and you need a loan, I can do it for you. And through the magic of smart contracts, it's all set up. I send you the money. I don't have to know about your credit score. You could be, you could have had a bankruptcy, you could have had 10,000 things. But if you have a savings account that you can leverage, um, you can borrow money. So in this case, the benefit of that is because then you don't want to sell out of your Bitcoin or sell out of your Ethereum or XRP because it's going to grow, right? So you just put it on hold as collateral, and then you make your regular USD payments to me after you borrow my money. And then I make some money off of you. So now the whole role of banking is changing. So I see the banking in the future going to be more custodial, meaning they're going to hold assets. That's where I see banking going to the future. Some banks will adapt, some will not.
Yeah, and the ones that don't will be left behind.
Yep, bought out by other banks.
Yeah. It's interesting, bro. It's a crazy time. I mean, you 10, 15 years ago, you never could have imagined that to some degree money wouldn't matter. Like the physical dollar would not be important.
Right. Yeah, but 10 and 15 years before that, you wouldn't think that me and you could be having a conversation through video.
It's true.
There's
It's
a time
true.
time changes, man.
Yeah, time and technology change everything.
Yep.
What a time to be alive.
Yes, sir. Sounds like a good ending to the interview.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me, bro. I really enjoyed it. I definitely learned some stuff in terms of the financial world and had some fun talking about cruising and logic and all those things. So thank you, bro.